My airlock door diorama is coming on nicely. I've painted the model and I've began to weather it. In this video I'm going to wash it and make it all dirty. How does that work?
Greetings fellow Earthlings and welcome back to Darlingbrough Sci-Fi Builds.
Since completing the paint work in my last video and starting on the weathering, I have been really keen to throw a nice wash over it, bring it all together and really make the details pop. However, I must admit I have never used any washes on a model in my life. So with that in mind, I've decided to do some experimenting on some test pieces before I let loose on my model.
Rather than worrying about creating some new test pieces, I actually salvaged these pieces here, which you may recognise if you've watched through the entire series so far. These were actually part of the original extractor fan unit which I had built in the first iteration of the airlock door. The first thing I needed to do before trying any kind of wash was to prepare them in such a way that I would get similar results to how the model had been prepared before. I sprayed them with the same red and rust coloured spray paint before going over the top using the same colour and the same colour mixtures as I had for the model. Once the test pieces had been painted, I then went over and just did a quick weathering using some sandpaper and some nail files similar to how I'd weathered the original model. I'll be honest, I wasn't paying any attention to how neat or careful I was being because, as I say, this was only a test piece and I just wanted to see how everything would react. I also decided to try and give the test pieces a spray with some clear varnish. The reason I chose to do this was because, having watched several YouTube videos on applying different washes, some of them recommended applying a coat of varnish before applying the wash, so you didn't mess up the painted layers underneath. I used a gloss on one, a matte on another, and left the third test piece completely blank. I tried these out because I wanted to know if applying varnish before applying the wash would affect the final outcome, and I'll come back to that later on in the video. Whilst I was in a mood to try new things, I decided to have a go at applying some decals as well. I discovered a rather nice black and yellow hazard warning strip decal set from a local model shop, Pendraken Models, and I decided that I wanted to add them to the airlock door. Now if you are interested in this decal set, I will put a link in the description below. Once again, as it was something I had never attempted before, I decided to sacrifice my cell shaded Sci-Fi crate as a test piece instead of applying it directly on the airlock door. I gathered all of the tools and equipment I would need together, such as tweezers, paintbrushes, scissors, and a bowl of nice warm water. I also purchased a set of micro set and micro sol setting solutions for decals. Why? Because YouTube told me to. Speaking of doing what YouTube tells you to do, hit the like and subscribe buttons if you are enjoying this video, this series, or this channel. Do it now, because YouTube told you to. I carefully cut out one of the decals, and then after measuring it for some reason, I placed it roughly where I was going to apply it. I applied some micro set onto the area I was going to adhere it to, and then popped the decal into the bowl of warm water and left it for about 30 seconds. Once the decal had softened, I then carefully used the tweezers to move it over to the crate, sliding it off the backing paper using the paintbrush. I then positioned it into place before using a cotton bud to squeeze out any air or liquid from underneath the decal. And that was pretty much it. Yes, it is that simple. Getting back to the test pieces that I had varnished, I made an interesting discovery. As I injected some excitement into my life and watched the varnish dry, I noticed that both the gloss and the matte varnish seemed to cause some sort of rippling effect on the paint that I'd used underneath. Now I'll be honest, I am not sure whether this is a chemical reaction or simply a reaction due to the temperature as I sprayed the varnish outside. However, I was concerned that this would affect the final outcome and decided to leave both test pieces to completely dry overnight before attempting any kind of wash. Rather than sit wasting more time waiting for things to dry, I decided to start playing around with a set of oil paints that I'd bought from my local Aldi store to see if I could create an interesting wash. I chose 3 of the most common colours used for a wash out of the set, which had a wide variety of colours. The colours chosen were crimson, umber and black, all colours I felt would make a good wash. It was then time to start mixing the wash. Having absolutely no experience whatsoever, I got quite nervous and so decided to turn to some alcohol for Dutch courage. Of course, when I say alcohol, I mean isoproponol alcohol, not the kind that you drink. Please do not drink isopropyl alcohol, it will not be good for your health. I squeezed out a small sample of each of the oil paints onto a piece of cardboard before using a paintbrush and mixing it in with the isopropyl alcohol, as you can see in this wonderful shot here. Well done, Richard, Cameraman of the Year award goes to you. I repeated the process with the second colour, having reframed the shot so you can actually see what's happening, and mixed it all together. However, I wasn't quite getting the results I was expecting. Rather than actually mixing together, the paint seemed to kind of disintegrate and break up into weird lumpy residue pieces. Rather than doing the sensible thing, which would have been to start from scratch, I did some hasty emergency research on YouTube to find out what I'd done wrong, and found out that instead of using isoproponol, I should have used some paint thinner. With that in mind, I added some thinner to the mixture, mixed it up, and then started sploshing it all over the test pieces, just to see what would happen. I tried applying the 3 different colours in different areas so I could gauge what the best colour to use would be. I then started to immediately dab off the excess wash. And this is where I discovered that the paint thinner actually helped me remove the paint underneath. This is clearly not what's supposed to be happening. I noticed that the paint removal also occurred on the test piece with the clear matte varnish, although not as prolific. However, the test piece with the clear gloss varnish seemed to escape unscathed, although if I'm honest, it looked like shit. Admitting defeat, I did some further research and discovered white spirit was the appropriate thinner to use for oil paints. It even said on the bottle that it was appropriate for this type of paint. I ventured up to my local Tesco store and bought a bottle of it for £2. Feeling quietly confident I would soon be washing like a pro, I returned to the bench, got a dab of paint, dropped it in the solution and mixed. And nothing happened. No matter how much I tried to mix the paint with the white spirits, no reaction occurred. So after all of that palaver, I must admit I've not really made any progress with the diorama itself. In fact, I've made 0 progress because I've not even applied the decals. Now I must admit I was kind of hoping to be able to visit a few different art stores and have a look and see what else was available for creating washes. However, my car is currently off the road
and my only form of transport is my 2 feet. Now it would be interesting to know if anyone out there has had any similar experiences working with oil paints or creating washes. Have you had the same problems I have? And if you have, then please leave a message in the comments down below. How did you resolve it? And do you have any hints or tips that I should follow when it comes to giving this model a nice coat of grime and dirt? Now I appreciate that I haven't made any progress on this model this week, and I don't want you to be disappointed, so I will leave you with some shots of some army men that I stole from my son's toy box on the model, so you can get an idea of what it's going to look like when it's finished. So stay watching for another few seconds. In the meantime, until I can get to an art store, check out the rest of the videos in the series. Hasta la vista. I promise I'll be back.